right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome. Welcome to another one of Wellspring's Be Well webinars. And so our Be Well Talk series is a series designed to talk about a variety of different topics from experts in the community. And so today's topic is reconnecting with the body after cancer. And so I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today. If we could have the next slide, please. Perfect. So I'm very excited to introduce Mihaela Dirlea. And so Mihaela actually is with Wellspring as a program leader and has her own private practice as well. So just a little bit of an introduction here. Mihaela is a social worker, psychotherapist, and qualified mindfulness instructor in Toronto. She has worked with cancer survivors and families for the last 13 years. She has been counseling cancer survivors around challenges associated with cancer survivorship, and she has been delivering mindfulness programs for cancer survivors, staff in healthcare, graduate students, and correctional officers in the last several years. So we're very excited to have her on board with us today, and I will pass it over to her for our presentation for today.
Thank you so much, Vanitha. So hi, everybody. It's always strange a little bit not to see who I'm talking to, but I'm very glad to be here with you today and to spend this afternoon talking about something that's actually really important to me, and I believe it might be important to you too. So I'll just start by acknowledging that the land on which I am here today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And we're here to talk today about cancer and being in the body. And perhaps I'll like to start by asking you to type in the chat maybe one word or a phrase about what you're hoping to get out of this today. So why are you here today? What are you hoping to get out of this? And as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that oh yes, I can see. Okay, great. Some reconciliation, I imagine, with the body. Some practical exercises, great. Tools and tips. Clues to improve my fatigue, deep information, inner calmness, hope, feeling different with my body, and ability with my body coming in line with that. Okay, great. So I'm hearing, yes, that people are here to right on topic to get some hope with some exercises to connect to their body, to get some more relaxation practices, to get some more calmness, and perhaps more depth in the relationship to yourself and your body. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to give this talk because in my work with cancer survivors, I often do offer and guide somatic and mindfulness practices to connect with our bodies. And I noticed that when people are going through cancer, there are some specific barriers that people face when they're trying to connect with their bodies. And if you face that, I want you to know that you're not alone. But often it shows up as I can't, like you're asking me to do a mindfulness practice and I can't, or I feel too uncomfortable, or as soon as I get in touch with my body, I become more afraid. Actually, I don't become more calm and more at peace with myself. I become more afraid, or I have so many thoughts. And as soon as I tune in, my dark thoughts come and my worries come, and it's not helpful. So I'd rather not do it. People talk about experiencing fear of cancer recurrence or cancer progression when they're getting in touch with their bodies. So I want you to know that if you're experiencing this, you're not alone in this. These are very common experiences that people face when they're going through cancer. And that there are ways around this. And what I'm hoping to cover today will be some sort of mindfulness adjacent strategies to get in touch with the body that might not be as difficult. So today we'll talk a little bit about why this is important. We'll talk a little bit about the common barriers that people face. So some of the common experiences people have when they're trying to do somatic and mindfulness practices. I'm hoping to give you some tips and tools of some practices that you may already, perhaps might be already doing, and you're getting what you'll get out of this is that you need to do more of it, or perhaps some new strategies that you haven't yet tried. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I do believe that everybody comes in with their own resources, and you are experts on your own lives. But what I'm hoping to give is some tools and some tips that might be beneficial to you. And then we'll talk a little bit about where to go next for support and to continue practicing. And we'll talk about next steps. So how you can integrate this into your life if any of it speaks to you. So why is this important? I'd like to hear again from you. If you can put in the chat just one word or a phrase about why you think it's important to stay connected with our bodies, and perhaps especially during cancer treatment, or cancer survivorship. Yeah, I'm seeing some answers. So being true to myself, finding a more positive outlook. Beautiful. Healing, some healing. Yes, there's a lot of healing that's needed. And our bodies are healing a lot, right? As we're going through cancer, but perhaps more an emotional and psychological healing too. Don't want to feel separate from my body. Bodies carry inner wisdom. That's lovely. Bodies provide calmness. They help us deal with the negatives. Healing again, mind and body health, that connection to overcome fear and other emotional feelings. Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I'm hearing that, yes, a lot of people are looking for ways to be more okay in their bodies and to experience a more depth and more calmness, and a wider range of emotions, and be more positive. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So some of the reasons I came up with, and again, it's not an exhaustive list, but why I think it's important to stay connected with our bodies is, first of all, practical things, reporting new symptoms. So often people are asked to, during their regular follow-up, to come back and report if anything has changed in their bodies. So if we are tending to numb ourselves emotionally, or disconnect from physical sensations, so as soon as I feel a sensation that might be a little scary, I'm going to distract myself, I'm going to watch a movie, I'm going to call a friend, I'm going to just pretend it's not there, then it's harder for me to actually track it. And it's harder for me to report it. And I might just ignore it and deny it, and that might not be helpful for my overall health. And that identifying side effects of treatments. So often, a lot of the treatments that are given for cancer do have a big recovery time, and the side effects are often really impairing and serious, that need a big adjustment for people. So being able to identify and become more nuanced in the way we notice the side effects, have a little bit more resolution, identify more subtle cues of the side effects, can be helpful in treating them as well. Tracking improvements. So when we are when we are in rehabilitation, and we are working on adjustments, and we're working on our recovery goals, it might actually, staying connected with the body might actually give us information that we're doing things well, that things are improving. And so being able to identify that, like many of you said, it might help you become more positive. So it might help you celebrate successes, right? When we are noticing, oh, last week I was an 8 out of 10 fatigue, but to this week I'm a 7 out of 10. And maybe that difference is subtle, but if I'm not connected with my body, I might not be able to notice it and celebrate it. And there's research that shows that staying connected with our bodies helps psychological health and well-being. So research shows that mindfulness training significantly enhances interoceptive abilities. So that means our ability to notice changes in our bodies, and to notice sensations in our bodies, which actually reduces anxiety levels. And so mindfulness exercises that are focused on bodily sensations showed notable benefits in mental health outcomes. So it's not just our anecdotal experience, it's also research that shows us it's important to stay connected with our bodies. And when we're having a hard time, it's very seductive to emotionally numb, to try to avoid, to try to distract ourselves, and to try to just disappear from the experience. And but we know from trauma theory and from psychological research that we cannot actually selectively numb out only negative experiences. When we disconnect from negative experiences, we also disconnect from positive experiences without wanting to. So the body is the original home of the psyche. When we lose our connection to the body, we lose our connection to our true selves. And here's another quote from a psychoanalyst who lived in Toronto. You can't fight your body. It will always hold the truth of your experience. The work is to listen and to allow it to teach you. So there's lots of knowledge and wisdom in our bodies, just like some of you have already mentioned in the chat. So it sounds like we're on the same page there. All right, so I'd like to spend a little bit of time just talking about the common barriers that I've noticed happen for people who are going through cancer and are trying to get into more somatic and mindfulness practices and stay more connected to their bodies. So the first one is being with difficulty being with thoughts. So people often talk about all the worries that they have and dark thoughts, and some days are really hard. Lots of thoughts. It might affect the ability to sleep and things like that. So as soon as we check in or bring attention inward, the array of thoughts come gushing in, and it's really hard to stay with that because they're unpleasant thoughts, they're negative thoughts. People talk about fear of cancer recurrence. So as soon as I notice an ache or a pain, I'm thinking, I believe that my cancer's come back, or I'm afraid that my cancer's come back. Body as a reminder of cancer and the story of cancer. So as soon as I get in touch with my body, all I think about is cancer, because that's the only relationship I have, right? And body as a reminder of loss. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of these individually. So being with difficult thoughts. So people talk a lot about a lot of the different challenges that are happening, like financial stress. What if I will lose my job? I am now living with brain fog. I can't remember things as easily. I can't multitask as easily. I feel like my thinking is compromised. I feel like I'm constantly in a fog. I used to be very high achieving at work, and now I believe that I wouldn't be performing as well. So if I do return back to work, to that same job, how am I going to function, and will I lose my job? What will other people think? And also, yeah, will I perform enough? And also the stress, right? So some people believe that the stress of work has led them to get cancer in the first place. So then they want to redirect their energy, so to not focus so much on work. But then when we go back to work, what does that mean in terms of work-life balance? And will that be okay for the culture at my work? Will people let me go if I don't go above and beyond like I used to? People talk about feeling a sense of isolation, even though maybe not being physically isolated. So even though we might have good communities around us and good family members and good support from friends, and everybody's meaning well and trying to help, that unless you have gone through it, you don't quite understand it, and that comes with a sense of isolation. People talk about their changes in roles and responsibilities to their communities and their families and their friends, so and their families basically. So what if I don't see my kids grow up? People talk about fear of the future, fear of losing their independence, fear of death, fear of suffering. So lots of really emotionally heavy, dark thoughts, existential thoughts, right? I don't recognize my life anymore. So much has been lost. I don't recognize my life anymore, right? So I don't do the same things anymore. I don't enjoy the same things anymore. I cannot participate in the same activities anymore. And sometimes people feel like they cannot show their emotions, that they're experiencing a lot of fear and anxiety and terror, perhaps, and hopelessness about the treatment and the future, but that they feel like there may be a burden to their families, so they might not want to show that. They don't want to show their emotions. They feel like perhaps the better option is to contain that and be more positive for the families. But those thoughts are there. So when we bring attention inward, they might come up. Often people ask about, why did this happen to me? Why me? What have I done to do this, to deserve this? And why do bad things happen to good people? And should I have done something different? So these are some of the thoughts that people have shared with me that comes up when they're turning attention inward. So it makes a lot of sense. These are really big, heavy emotional thoughts. It makes a lot of sense that nobody wants to spend a lot of time with this, right? It's deflating. People talk about fear of recurrences often. Some people feel like they could have caught cancer sooner, only if they would have been more aware of their bodies. And after cancer, they tend to overcompensate. So they tend to become hypervigilant about every small body sensation and every change in their body. And so this can lead to paralyzing fear, because a lot of our attention gets drawn there, and there isn't much else to think about. Or decision paralysis, like, I don't know if I should call my doctor with this or not, or an urge to avoid because it's so uncomfortable. Or the opposite, an urge to overuse the medical system. So calling my nursing line every week, because every week I'm noticing some changes in my body, and I need this reassurance from my doctor that everything's okay. The shock of the cancer diagnosis has been so big that I need the reassurance. So it's that idea that when I feel my body, I get scared, because every small ache and pain, it makes me wonder if my cancer is coming. And people talk about body as a reminder of cancer. So much has changed. So many changes are going through our body as we're going through cancer. There can be hair loss. People talk about looking in the mirror, and my face looks different. My face is rounder from the treatment, and I don't recognize my face anymore, and I don't like looking in the mirror. I have all these scars on my body. I don't like taking off my clothes. I don't like facing it. There's so much grief with it. Or weight changes. So I'm bigger with chemotherapy. My body tends to keep more water. So water retention is different. So there's a big adjustment, even in terms of body image. And so when we're bringing attention to the body, it can then remind us, right, of the cancer. And sometimes that becomes really overwhelming and overbearing. My weight gain and my fatigue from radiation remind me of my cancer. Sometimes I feel like all I am is a cancer survivor, and who am I anymore? What else is there in my life? There isn't much else in my life, and that's my only identity. And so that, again, is really unpleasant. So it makes sense that people don't want to be reminded of that. And lastly, the last barrier identified is body as a reminder of loss. So there's so much grief that people are facing, grief from loss, not necessarily grief from losing a person, but grief from experiencing a loss. So there's a lot of changes in our bodies that require an adjustment, and there's changes in our bodies that change the function of what we can do in our daily life. So how we can lead our activities of daily life is completely different. So people live with lots of discomfort and pain in their body after treatment. neuropathy, someone mentioned in the chat. So loss of sensation and tingling in our fingers and toes. And so of course that comes with a lot, like people can't open a jar anymore or put on their clothes and close buttons and zippers and things like that. So that's a lot of loss of independence that now requires a whole different orientation to self-sufficiency and independence. Whereas before we may have been quite independent and self-sufficient, and we may have been the caregivers to everybody else, and now we're requiring support from others. People talk about fatigue, so energy level. This is a really big one. There's something called cancer-related fatigue. I'm sure some of you know this. That it's a little different than regular fatigue, and that's one thing that people don't know that much. That when we have regular fatigue, we might be able to take a nap or rest and it improves. But with cancer-related fatigue, it's not quite as simple. Some of the strategies that we use for regular fatigue might not work so well for cancer-related fatigue. And so again, with less energy, there's less ability to engage in activities that used to bring us joy. There can be less pleasure in life, but also a reduced ability to function. And so we might require more support from around. People often have sleep problems, often relating to the worrying thoughts that they experience, but also side effects of treatment like steroids, keeping people up at night. And when we have sleep problems and we don't get proper sleep, everything else is more wonky, right? It's harder for us to identify, to access our resources, to manage our moods during the day, manage our anxiety during the day and our fears. So everything becomes a little bit harder. Lymphedema. So sometimes when radiation or surgery damages lymph nodes, people experience swelling in parts of their bodies. So that can become really uncomfortable and painful, and can change the way we use that body part. So sometimes we'll have swollen arms or legs that, of course, will change the way we can use our arms or legs. So that's a huge loss as well. Brain fog, as I mentioned earlier, it's a really common experience, not just with chemotherapy, but with other cancer experiences as well. And again, it's that idea that I can't multitask anymore. I can't remember my words as clearly. I can't think as clearly. I can't problem solve as clearly. And everything has to slow down. I can't organize my life that well anymore. I need to write things down in order to remember them. So there's a big sense of loss there as well. And then bowel and urinary incontinence. People talk about having changes in their bowel and urinary function, which perhaps sometimes requires incontinence products like adult diapers. And often people feel a lot of shame and embarrassment about that, and they might not. They might avoid going out of the house, or if they go out of the house, they might need to know exactly where the washroom is located, and that can become a big inconvenience for people. And if people start avoiding their communities, they might also prevent receiving some social support there too. There is speech and swallowing changes that people go through sometimes. And so it might change the ability to feel understood and to be understood and to communicate, the ability to eat and drink and function on that level. Which again, these are things that we take for granted and we don't even think twice about, that I can communicate right now, that I can speak to you simply without much effort. So it's a huge sense of loss and grief if we do that, if we lose that. And finally, sexual changes. People talk about changes in their libido, and so perhaps a decreased interest in sexual activity, or physiological changes like erectile dysfunction or vaginal stenosis. So again, a huge sense of loss there, things that make us be well and affect our quality of life. So if you are experiencing some of these, or one of these even, it makes a lot of sense that when you bring attention inward to the body, it might bring up this sense of grief. And again, that might be leading to that might be creating a block and getting in touch. I do want to say though that we don't, as a culture and as a society, we don't pay enough attention to what's going well. So even when we go into our doctor's office for a follow-up, reviewing some tests, chances are a doctor out of 20 tests doesn't say, excuse me, 19 are great. Just this one we need to figure out. Our doctors don't say, your liver, your thyroid, your heart, these are your kidneys are all functioning really well, but it's just the stomach issue that we need to look at. So we miss the opportunity to notice what's going well. So when we tune into our body, we notice what's not going well, we notice what's lost, partly because that's the culture we've created and that's how we relate, and we narrate our lives. John Kabat-Zinn, who's the founder of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, says, as long as you're breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you. So as long as you're breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you. And that might be an interesting, maybe helpful perspective for those of you who looked for more positivity from today's talk, to remember. So we'll switch gears a little bit. And we will talk about tips and tools now. So this is not an exhaustive list, but as I mentioned, my hope is that it can give you some guidance, maybe some new ideas about what to try out if your intention is to connect with the body more. So the first practice I would like to lead today is called the straw breath. And it is a breathing practice. So there's 4 elements to it. The first element is breathing in through the nose. And the second is breathing out through the mouth, as if you have a straw in between your lips, like that. Then we also want to do belly breathing. So that means that when we're breathing in, we expand the abdomen. So often we breathe from our chest, but when we're breathing in, we want to expand the abdomen, ballooning it out. And when we breathe out, letting the abdomen go down. And then the last piece is we want to exhale longer than we inhale. And that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that induces relaxation, and the rest and relaxation, and the digest and rest mode of our body. So let's try that together a few times. So I'll count us in, breathing in through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out through the mouth, as if you have straw on your lips, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathing in through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out through the mouth, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. And I'll let you do it on your own, at your own pace, for 2 more times. Oh, I would love to hear from you in the chat, maybe one word or a phrase about how this practice felt in your body. Sometimes breathing practices are actually more activating for people. So if you experience that, please share that as well. Let me know if yes, I see some calming, helps you calm. Okay, great. So sometimes the hope is that it will help calm us. Sometimes there is no change, and sometimes there's actually, I feel a bit more anxiety. So if you have experienced a little bit more anxiety, then maybe this breath practice is not for you, and I'm hoping to give you some other tools. Okay, so some people talked about feeling more focus, and calm. Okay, great, beautiful. Okay. So the other practice I'd like to talk about, one of the other practices I'd like to talk about is informal mindfulness. So often with formal mindfulness practices, we sit and we bring attention to the breath. And when the mind wanders, we bring attention back to the breath or body sensation. But informal mindfulness is something that we can practice in our daily activities. It's something that we can do anytime. So we could do our daily activities with mindful awareness. And that requires bringing attention to what happens in the moment to moment. So what happens here, not what happens tomorrow or later. It's what happens here through our senses. And it's non-judgmentally. So non-judgmentally means that I'm not going to be thinking, oh, I should do this better. When I'm breathing, I should breathe deeper because that's better. That's a judgment. So when I'm going to be breathing mindfully, I'm just going to be noticing the breath, just taking stock. So we could be we could be showering mindfully, we could be eating mindfully, we could be walking mindfully, we could be mindfully washing our dishes every day, we could be petting our pet mindfully. And we could be doing mindful touch. So whenever we're touching, we could be noticing sensations. So if I'm going to wash my dishes mindfully, I'm going to use my senses bring my senses to the present moment. So I'm going to be looking at the water. I'm going to be looking at the dishes. I'm going to be looking at the textures and the colors. I'm going to be looking at the soap, the bubbles that get created. I'm going to be listening for the sound of the water, the sound of the dishes clanking. I'm going to be smelling the soap. I'm going to be smelling the water and the dishes. And I'm going to be with my skin, with my hands, I'm going to be noticing sensations of maybe the touch, like the wetness of water on my hands, or the warmth of the water on my hands, or the texture on the dishes that I'm washing. So I'm bringing attention to sensory information here in the moment without wishing that it was different, without judgment. If I'm going to be petting my pet mindfully, I am going to be, again, looking at my pet. I'm going to be listening for sounds that this interaction makes. I'm going to be smelling perhaps anything that comes out of this experience. Maybe my pet has bad, some bad smells or good smells. And I'm going to be noticing with my hands the sensations of petting the pet. So with my hands, I'm going to be noticing the softness of their fur, the texture of their fur. Yeah, so I'm not going to be thinking about what I'm going to do for dinner tomorrow. I'm going to really bring awareness to the senses here. So if this speaks to you, I would encourage you to think about what it doesn't, this is a non-exhaustive list. So you could be picking, mindfully folding my clothes or mindfully putting my shoes on. Any of that is okay. So again, a quote, our body is where we experience the world. By cultivating awareness of the body, we cultivate connection with life itself. So it sounds like that's absolutely in line with what some of you have already mentioned at the beginning, that we want to grow fuller into our life experience by staying connected with our body. Another practice I'm offering is a movement practice. So again, it's mindful movement. And so if I'm going to be doing, so what it entails is basically bringing attention inward, and I'm noticing muscles and tendons involved in the movement. So what I'm bringing my attention to is the sensation of stretching and pulling and pulsing and heat, for example, that is involved in movement. And I might be noticing differences between the two sides of the body. And again, I'm noticing with curiosity, non-judgment. I'm not, so if my mind wanders to, oh, I could a few months ago, I could lift my arm higher. Excuse me, that's not, I'm going to just notice that as a thought and then come back to, okay, so my invitation here is bring attention to muscles, tendons, sensations of pulling, pulsing, heat, stretching, pressure. So Yeah, I don't think I'll do this practice, but I think this is pretty clear for today. So that's something you can practice, just on your own in front of your computer. Like I'm going to be lifting my arms up, and as I'm lifting my arms up, I'm noticing where my muscles are working. When I'm bringing them back down, I'm noticing the weight in my arms, that my right just feels heavier than my left. I'm noticing the changes in muscles as I'm bringing them down. Different muscles at work with every movement. I might notice sort of heat now in my armpits, and heat on my moisture on my arms, on my hands. So it doesn't have to be an exercise class or a yoga class. You get to be doing that with any kind of movement. And the last practice is a progressive muscle relaxation practice. So in this practice, we tense and release various muscles throughout our body. So we systematically go through the body and first tense and then release muscles. And we do this without straining, so we don't have to overdo it and overexert ourselves. But we contract muscles, and on an out breath, we use our breath to let go of the tension. And at any point, if you feel uncomfortable, you can always stop and just take a break from the practice. I will leave this, but I will leave a very short version of it to give you a taste. I'm not going to go through the entire body, but I will go through maybe 2 or 3 body parts, so you can just notice what that feels like for you. So just taking a moment to come to a comfortable position. And so just recognizing this is your time, a time for complete and utter relaxation. And if it feels okay, allowing your eyes to close, give you full breaths. When you're ready, bringing your awareness to your feet and your toes. And on your in-breath, gradually curl your toes down and sense the muscles in your soles of your feet. Holding your breath just for a moment and the tension just for a few seconds, and then releasing the muscles in your feet as you breathe out. And just as you're releasing, feeling the tension in your feet wash away as you exhale, and noticing how different your feet feel tense and when they relax. So we'll do that again with your feet. So curling your toes and tensing the muscles in the soles of your feet and holding it for a few seconds. And on an out breath, releasing that and noticing the tension leaving. When you're ready, bringing awareness to your lower legs, to your calf muscles. And as you draw in a nice big deep breath, pointing your toes upwards to your knees and tighten the muscles of your calves and holding that just for a few moments. And on an out breath, letting the muscles go, letting the tension exit the body as you exhale. Once again, drawing in a deep breath and tightening your calf muscles. Tighten just for a few seconds and hold. And on out breath, letting it all go and bringing awareness to what it feels like for the muscles to soften. And in a moment, when you're ready, bring the attention to your thighs. And you can tense your thighs if you're sitting down by pushing your heels onto the floor. So on an in-breath, pushing your feet onto the floor and tightening your thigh muscles just for a moment. And as you're ready, exhale and let go of the tension. And once again, on an inhale, we tighten the thighs. Tighten, hold. And on an exhale, and just noticing your feet, your calves, and your thighs, if they feel a little bit more relaxed, and noticing the difference between what tension feels like and what relaxation feels like. So if we were to do all of this, we would be going through the entire body, but in the interest of time, I will not do that today. The last thing I would like to share about these somatic and mindfulness practices might be that a lot of people get discouraged because they believe that if we have thoughts during these practices, we're not doing it right. So I can't do mindfulness because I think too much. And I want to bust that myth a little bit, because when we are practicing mindfulness, we're actually practicing two attentional skills. One is noticing where our attention is at any point. So if I'm petting my cat, I'm noticing, oh, my thoughts went to what I'm going to make for dinner later. So I'm noticing where my attention is. And then the second skill is I'm moving my attention by on purpose to an object of attention. So I'm noticing that I'm thinking of dinner, and I'm moving it back to what my hand feels like on the fur of my pet, what my eyes see, the colors, what I'm smelling, what I'm hearing. So I'm noticing where the attention is, and then I'm moving, bringing it back. And the more we do this, easier it will become. And if we have if we do practice this, it can really help with getting more agency in terms of what's happening in our minds. So if I have dark thoughts about what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen to my job, what's going to happen to my family, what will happen to me, will it treat my work, those heavy thoughts, as if I keep practicing these attentional skills, I'll be able to easier than, oh, notice, this is a dark thought that I actually don't want to be having right now because it's not in my control, and I'm going to choose not to think that right now. So I'm going to bring my attention back to something else. And the more we practice, the easier. And so if any of these practices spoke to you, I would encourage you to find a community and to perhaps commit to a class. It will help with discipline and accountability. So you can join mindfulness groups. I know Wellspring offers some mindfulness and relaxation groups, some yoga classes, gym classes or dance classes. And there's also beautiful lists of online guided meditations that I could share with you. I didn't include a list today on the slides because I think it's not so practical, but if you do want some suggestions, please get in touch and I'm happy to share them. So as a next step, I'm going to invite you to choose one thing from today that stood out to you. So maybe it's a practice, maybe it's something that I said, maybe it's something that I gave an example from. My hope is that it's going to be a practice. So we talked about straw breath, we talked about mindful movement, we talked about informal mindfulness practices and progressive muscle relaxation. And see if you can challenge yourself to try it. So perhaps maybe trying like a mindful shower, and what might help remind you. So what might help remind you that you commit to yourself, that you might try a mindful shower. Maybe putting a Post-it on your shower, or putting your towel in a different spot to just remind you that you want to try that. And then my invitation would be to just be curious. Just be curious, what's that like? Like, what's that? Does that change anything? What was the impact of me not thinking about all the problems that I have and all the worries that I have in my shower, and rather just noticing what it feels like to be in my body here? So we talked about cancer and being in the body. We talked about why it's important, common barriers, tips and tools, as I said, resources, and next steps. And I'd like to end with a quote: when you soften and inhabit your body, you become more open to the flow of aliveness and love. Soften and inhabit your body, you become more open to the flow of aliveness and love in the moment. That's by Tara Brach, who's a meditation teacher on the stage.